Hello, everyone. Today with us, we have Allison Baggerly, who paid off $111,000 of debt in 4.5 years on two teachers' salaries. So I'm excited to hear her story, share it with you. Allison, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Happy to talk about some of our biggest financial fails, but also biggest financial comebacks.
Right. I mean, that's in our greatest failures is where we have kind of our greatest success, right? And that's why I'm
Mhm.
excited for you to share your story. So, how did you guys end up with $111,000 of debt in the first place?
I mean, it wasn't even something that we realized was happening. I was very young. I was 24 years old. My husband and I got married. We had never talked about money at all, like not one single conversation. And on our honeymoon, we got pregnant. So it wasn't until I know, unexpectedly, surprise. And we came back from our honeymoon, realized we were pregnant, sat down for the first time to have a conversation about money and looked up the cost of daycare and realized that we didn't have that extra money every month to pay for daycare. So we were like, well, where's our money going? And that was the first time that we ever sat down and we totaled up his car loans and pretty much student loans. He had some credit card debt that he had paid off just very like right before the wedding. So we don't even really include that. And that's when we realized, oh my goodness, we have essentially 9 months to create this buffer in our budget so that way we could afford daycare because there was no way I could stay home and be able to make all of those payments just financially as two teachers.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great not a great realization, but it's one of those things where sometimes life, the pressures of having a kid, you're like, "Hey, we gotta figure this out." So, like, what's the first thing you did when you said, "Okay, we got $111,000 in debt." How did you start to tackle that?
Oh my gosh, I cried. That was the very first thing I did was I cried. No, I remember we were sitting at this like old hand-me-down kitchen table and I cried. He was just in shock. I think that we both felt like the weight of being adults really for the first time, like having to be responsible and seeing how our debt made us feel so irresponsible. And so we said, okay, we've got to do something. And we knew we needed to save for a baby because as teachers, I didn't get a paid maternity leave. I only had so many days banked up. We knew that I would not be paid for about 2 months. So we first said, how can we save a certain amount in our savings and then tackle debt? So while we were trying to save money, we were also starting the entire budgeting process. And when I say starting, I mean starting and failing and tweaking and making little shifts here and there. So that way we could figure out how to live and make all of our bill payments, save money, and also put extra to debt without feeling like we hated our life in the process.
So, how did you come up with extra money? Because it sounded like you didn't have the money for daycare. So, where did the
Mhm.
extra money come from?
The extra money came from cutting out expenses, cutting out, not completely cutting out restaurants, but really pulling back because we were just spending money without thought, reckless abandon. Just we want it, we'll spend it, no problem. I mean, we would get down to like 12 cents in our checking account and be like, okay, we gotta just hold it together until payday. So there was never any intentional spending before. I know for me personally, I struggle with impulse spending. I love spending money. I get this high. Like when an Amazon box drops on my door, I'm like, oh, it's Christmas morning for me. I still to this day love spending money. So a lot of it came down to me being aware of my spending habits and making sure I was intentional. It looked like going through and finding subscriptions to like a gym membership that we didn't even know we were paying for. It was just going on a random credit card. And my husband hadn't gone to that gym in like 2 years. So there's $40 a month. So being very intentional, cutting back on certain areas, and then really trying our best to save. And once our savings hit a number that we felt comfortable with, that's when we started paying off debt. And we had to do it very strategically because we needed to free up cash flow. So our goal was to pay off our smallest balance with the highest minimum payment, monthly minimum payment. So that way, if we had a loan that was $7,000, but it had a monthly minimum payment of $250, we saw that. We said, okay, that's $250 that when we pay this off can be allocated to future daycare. So that's how we tackled our debt.
Now, when you say you did the smallest balance, but with the highest minimum payment, right? That's an interesting distinction because I haven't heard that very often. How different were your payments? Do you remember? Like, was
Oh my
one
gosh.
250, 150? Were they all over the board?
I don't remember. I know that my husband had consolidated his student loans at one point. So we had one big loan and the payment was like $483 a month. But then we had my car loan and we had, which was like $296. And then I had a whole bunch of smaller student loans. So for us, it looked like looking at those smaller student loans and just paying them off. Our goal is to pay off a certain number of them by the time the baby came. And we actually were able to do that. And once we hit that goal, we paused and we said, okay, we're not going to pay off debt now. We're in baby mode. So we're going to wait for baby to come. We're going to get through a healthy delivery, healthy maternity leave, and use the money we had saved to cover our costs for maternity leave. And then once I went back to work, we restarted our debt free journey. So we actually had probably about 5 months in there where we just kind of paused, lived our life, made our minimum debt payments, tried our best to write a budget and put money into savings to pay for hospital bills and anything that came along. And then we restarted.
No, that's interesting because I think a lot of people they get like, that intensity where they're like, "Hey, I just want to pay
Hmm.
it all off." And your journey might be a little bit more palatable for people where it's like, "Okay, I don't have to do this in a year or 2 years, right? Like
Hmm.
I can do it in a short period of time. 4.5 years is still a short period of time, right? For
It
111. Yeah.
it didn't feel like a short period of time, but you're right, it is. For 2 teacher salaries, we had eventually 2 kids in daycare, we got pregnant again, did the same thing, built up our savings, paused during the second half of the pregnancy through my maternity leave, and then started going again, but it's okay to pivot. And I think so often we get this plan and we feel like we had zero control before. We felt like we lost all control with our money. So this plan gives us this sense of control. And we feel like if we stray from the plan, we've lost control. And that's not true. We can pivot. You can make little changes. You can rearrange your debt order. You can pause and it doesn't mean that you're a failure or that you're not going to eventually get to that end goal.
Yeah, I love that because I think a lot of people do they give up. Like I remember I used to teach classes, and people will come back a second time, and like a
Mhm.
year and a half later, 2 years later, and they felt like a failure. Like I got to take this class again. I'm like, no, you came back. Like you're still on the track, right? You still have a little bit of progress.
Exactly.
You're not where you started, you know.
Mhm.
And so that's great. So did you run into any pitfalls like during your debt payoff journey where you're like, like you got these expenses you didn't realize coming, obviously the baby and things like that, but anything else that comes to mind?
Oh my gosh, yes. In 4.5 years, I mean, life happens. About 3 months before we were supposed to become debt free, my husband's car needed a complete new transmission, or his transmission went out, and that is very expensive. So we have 3 months. I mean, there is the light. We see that light at the end of the tunnel. I could touch the light, right? Like we have been in this for over 4 years, and his transmission just went completely bad. So we were faced with this decision, and everyone told us sell the car for parts and just get a cheaper used car for $10,000. And maybe if this had happened earlier in our journey, we would have done that. But we had been working so hard. We knew there was some sort of vacation celebration on the horizon once we met this. So we went against what people said, what our friends and family told us to do. And we had his transmission rebuilt for $3,000, drained our savings. And his car lasted like another 4 years. It was perfect. It was a great decision in that moment for our family, but it really made us question it. I was like, why bother? Like, there was a part of me that thought, life is just going to keep happening. This is never going to, like, we're never going to cross that finish line, it felt
Hmm.
like. And then, actually, 1 month after that happened, we decided, okay, this will put us back like 2 months with this transmission issue. We found out that my youngest son, needed a very necessary surgery that was going to cost like $6,000. We could not wait. So we did the surgery. We ended up pausing for about 6 months until the car was fixed. My son had his surgery. He was healthy. I taught summer school that year to try to help cover some of those medical bills. And then very shortly after that, we actually drained our savings account to make our final debt payment, like completely drained it because we were so ready. And then the next day we got another medical bill in the mail. So it wasn't the wisest thing, but we just could see that light and we just needed that win under our belt after doing it for so long and hitting those setbacks.
Yeah, you touched on something
Mhm.
kind of briefly, but I'm curious. You said you taught summer school.
Yes.
What role did making extra money play in paying off your debt?
Oh my gosh, it made a huge impact. I would say that it probably had us I mean, really with 2 kids in daycare, we couldn't send that much extra money to debt. So anytime we could find ways to increase our income, if it was even just a little bit or a lot, we really tried to send that extra money to debt. This looked like tax refunds. We would get our tax refund, we would send 70% of it to debt, keep 30% for fun. I taught summer school. My husband taught summer school. My husband used to be a band director and he had to go on these band trips, so he got his bus driver's license and he drove the bus for the band trips because he was going to be there anyway. And he got paid $50 a trip. So he was sometimes going twice in a week. All of that money went extra to debt. But the biggest one, the biggest impact we had was when we chose to willingly move school districts and take $10,000 raises. And at the time, we were working in this little tiny school district. I was probably making $45,000 a year. My husband was probably making $55,000 a year, maybe 50. And I was pregnant. My husband moved first. He transferred 45 minutes away, long commute, bigger school district could pay him more money, and he actually worked less. And the summer before he left, he had already put in his notice, he was gonna leave. I was on this committee, and I was sitting right next to the superintendent of our school district, pregnant. I was, like, 8 months pregnant, sitting next to him in this committee, and during one of the breaks, he looks at me and he said, "What can we do? What can we do to get Matt to stay? We value him, we like him, he's a hard worker, we want him to stay here. What can we do?" And I looked him straight in the face and I said, "You can give him a raise." And he said, "I can do anything but that."
Oh,
And I
wow.
said, "Well, then he's not going to stay." I said, "His raise, his increase in pay covers this child's daycare. We need that raise. So if you can't do that, he's not going to stay." And the superintendent was like, "Okay." So by making those transitions and being willing to get uncomfortable, pick ourselves up, move, meaning make all new friends in a different city, whole new work environment, which can be challenging and scary. We were able to continue to make progress after our second son came. So we didn't have to slow down our debt payoff journey because we had more income coming in to cover daycare for him.
Yeah, see, that's a really good point that I think
Mhm.
some people, they want to have a quicker progress, but
Yeah.
they're not realizing like there are opportunities, like what you said, finding another, like let's say you work for an employer and there's another wing of your employer that will pay you more that you could get a raise for, but it involves moving.
Mhm.
But like you said, if you can make $10,000 to $20,000 more a year as a couple, the amount of progress you can make, that's tremendous.
Exactly.
But how did that work? I'm just curious, when you guys moved, how did that process work for you guys? Were you excited about it? Were you nervous? Was it an easy transition?
It was not easy. Now, he moved first. So I was pregnant. I had my baby. I finished out the year in that same school district with the superintendent that wanted my husband to stay. And he commuted 45 minutes to an hour every single day. About three-fourths way through the year, we moved to that city. So then I commuted 45 minutes back. And it was hard, it was scary, but I mean, we had each other. And I knew that going into a new school as a teacher, you make friends. And I wasn't ever really worried about that. I mean, I'm a very extroverted person. So,
No.
yeah, so I wasn't super worried about that because I knew that we had each other. I knew I would have a support system. I just had to find that support system. And honestly, it was kind of exciting. It was exciting to explore a new city and find little pockets of fun places and things to do. I was excited about it. Was it scary? Yes. I definitely think that just my personality, I'm not as scared to do something like that as other people might be, but 100% it was worth it. And if I had to do it again, I would do the same thing over again. I would make the move.
So, okay, you paid off the debt. You moved to this place. You get the extra income. You use your extra money that you have from savings to pay off the debt. You're debt free. You guys said you did some sort of celebration. What did you guys do?
Yes. Well, for 3 months, we spent money like no one else. We spent so much money. What I wanted, I got. Like, I just, because we were sending over $2,000 a month, really, to debt, if you think about it, 20, maybe even up to like $2,400 a month. So we spent all of it on who knows what, I don't know, like, but it made me happy. After about 3 months of that, I was like, okay, this is getting excessive. Like, I realized that we have a problem. It's mostly me. And so that's whenever we really started focusing on investing. I wish we had started investing sooner. One good thing about being teachers is we both had pensions. I don't have my pension anymore. I've rolled that out into an IRA. So we're investing in the background with our pensions, and we always were, which is wonderful. So we started investing, built up that 3 month emergency fund ish, and then we started saving for a trip. So we became debt free in August. And that following June, we took a big, like 5 night trip with another couple friends to an adults only, all inclusive resort in Mexico. It was wonderful. And it was just our big celebration.
How much of a motivating factor was having something to look forward to? Or was that just like, hey, when we pay off debt, we'll figure out something? Or was that a motivating factor for you paying off your debt?
It was not a motivating factor, especially in the beginning, because it felt
Mm,
so far away. When we were originally sitting down to look at our debt, the last thing on my mind was a vacation.
mm,
I just wanted to have that extra money every month. Now, the last couple of months, I I want to say it was a motivating factor, but what's interesting is that when you're on this process that takes multiple years, your habits change, your personality changes. What you want and what you're willing to spend money on shifts and changes. So I was no longer really tempted to overspend on all of these things. I no longer needed this external thing, this external carrot, right?
mm.
Trying to get to the carrot to keep me motivated. I was motivated because internally I had been doing it for so long, it became second nature to me. So I no longer needed this like motivational celebratory trip to keep us going, but it was kind of like a nice icing on the cake type situation. I was just motivated because it's what we had been doing for so long, and I was really proud of what we had done.
Mm.
So in the past, what would have I would have needed external motivation, it very much became internal over time.
That's great. I mean, I think for us, like we wanted to go to Hong Kong and Disneyland. I was like, dude, this is going to be so awesome. So I was super motivated by that. But I think to your point, everybody has a different reason why they're paying off their debt, right? What
Mhm.
would you say is your biggest reason other than daycare? I mean, obviously that's an immediate need. Was there like an additional reason where like I'd like to be debt free?
No, I just wanted to not feel so stressed about money.
Mm,
I mean, I was so stressed about money. I grew up in a house where money was very much a major source of stress and frustration. And I internalized that to the fact of I I don't want to fight about money. I don't want to have these sleepless nights. I don't want any of that. Financial security is so important to me almost to a fault. To a fault. Like now, like I think I might like this sounds so stupid and you're going to think I'm crazy because you're going to be like, "No, that's not possible." I almost think I invest too much, like I save too much because it's almost like when you hoard your money, that can also be an unhealthy way. And so I have to find this balance. But for me, it was very much not wanting to repeat what I saw as a child and be willing to go to bed at night and just know, like, okay, when my son was, after we became debt free, he was in the children's hospital for a week. We were left
mm,
with $15,000 of medical bills. And during that process, not once did I have to say, oh my gosh, how are we going to afford this? I just knew we have it covered. And that peace of mind is like no other. So I would definitely say that was my like big push and motivation and what I was really doing it for. Which sounds really selfish because I'm like it was all about me, which it was it wasn't, but it was about my peace of mind, which really like infiltrates into every aspect of your life and your home.
Yeah, I always love that analogy of like when you're on an airplane and they say like if the oxygen mask comes down,
Mhm.
first put it on yourself and then put it on your kid, right? Like, yeah, maybe it's selfishly motivated, but
Mhm.
the reality is you got to take care of yourself first so that you can really be effective in taking care of the rest of your family. And so understanding how stress plays a role financially in your well-being and how that impacts your husband, your kids, people around you, it can be huge. And so I definitely connect with the peace of mind aspect. I'm sure a lot of
Yeah.
people listening, they're saying, hey, I would love to be debt free so I don't have to worry about how I'm going to pay my bills every month. Which leads me to you at some point you created a blog, Inspired Budget. Like
Yes.
what was the idea behind starting a blog?
I never thought I would. So I went through this entire process of paying off our debt. I honestly said, okay, we're going to sit down, we'll write a budget, we'll pay off our debt. And then when our debt is done, like I'm never budgeting again. Don't try to tell me what I'm going to do with my money. I am my own person. No one else gets to try to control me. No piece of paper, no computer software. I really thought I would reach this goal and then like wash my hands of all personal finance. But during this long process, I became incredibly passionate about budgeting, about paying off debt and personal finance, which was a surprise to everyone, especially me, because I love spending money. I have not I don't have the best track record, right? And I know my patterns. So I have to create some very big personal boundaries. Well, after we became debt free, I continue to talk about it all the time. I continue to talk about budgeting. And I was visiting family over Easter. And I'm sitting here chatting about it once again, like I always do. And my cousin in law, so my cousin's wife, said to me, Allison, shut up. And I was like, Janet, like that was really rude. And she was like, enough. You come here every year talking about the same thing. Like, we are not the people you need to be talking about this to. There are other people out there that need to hear your message. You should start an online business. Now, she had an online business. And so I immediately thought, well, no one's going to want to hear from me. There's already people doing this. Like, this isn't a good idea. But after really thinking about it and talking to her about it a little bit more, I started realizing like this is something I'm good at. This is something I enjoy. I'm a teacher, so I have that skill set. I have this passion. And so, about 3 weeks later, I stayed up till 2 o'clock in the morning with my husband and my mom, and we bought the domain name Inspired Budget. And it started as a blog and turned into a social media following. And now there's a podcast and a book and all the things really where I can help people who really are in the position that I found myself in many years ago, give them hope, inspiration, and guidance, like a step by step process to overcome any of their financial struggles.
Yeah, that's incredible. And one thing that I think is great about your story, and I'd love for you to at least dive into a little bit, is you no longer teach. And
No, I don't.
so now you work for yourself. So you kind of went from, hey, I'm $111,000 in debt. I work for somebody else. And like you said, you like to have the freedom to not have somebody else tell you what to do. Now you own your own business. So how was that first, like that transition from going from being a teacher to owning your own business? What did that look like for you?
Oh my gosh, it was the scariest thing I've ever done in my life. It was not easy. I set a goal whenever I started Inspire Budget to leave the classroom within 5 years. My goal was to replace my teacher income, which we know historically, not that much money, right? Like I wasn't making six figures. I was probably making $60,000 a year. And so my goal was to consistently replace that, after business expenses and everything in 5 years. It was really hard. It was really hard doing both. Starting the business, working full time. I had a 6-year old and a 4-year old. I mean, my health declined. It was very, very hard. So after 2 years, I had somewhat replaced my income. So we decided for me to take the leap. I had set up a quit teaching fund, which was just a separate savings account that really a lot of my profit was going into from my business. So we had this leeway, and I moved in 2019. I left teaching, I finished out the year, and I started working full-time from home. It was a scary jump, especially going from this salary position to very much an up and down roller coaster. I mean, you know how it is. Roller coaster income. So I had to come up with ways for me to feel secure in my income and the way I was paying myself so that my financial stress, if I had any, didn't come through my business and it didn't like seep into what I was putting out there in the world.
Yeah, and how long did it take you to to replace your income from teaching?
I mean, I would say within the first year, I replaced it. I can't exactly remember, but within the first year of going full time, I made six figures with Inspired Budget.
Yeah, see, that's what I love about this because I feel like a lot of people listening, you're like, I'm overwhelmed with debt. I'm in a job that I don't necessarily love. Like, I wish I was in a very different place. One of the things that you
Mhm,
hinted towards earlier, when you started paying off your debt, you developed different habits, different
mhm,
priorities. You had different passions, right? Now you didn't
mhm,
like budgeting before, and then
mhm,
afterwards you're like, I want to tell the world about this, you know? And so I hope that encourages people watching or listening, saying, hey,
mhm,
who knows where this is going to end up, but the first thing you got to do is start the process, and in that
mhm.
process, in that journey, you'll start to discover new things about yourself. And so one of the things that kind of, as we get towards the end here, what are some tips that you have for people that are in debt? They're Allison 4.5 years before paying off the debt. What should they do to get started?
I think the first thing that you need to do is awareness is key. You need to own your truth. It is so hard, and I talk to people all the time, and they're like, "I don't wanna know. I don't wanna know
Mm.
how much debt I have and how much the minimum payments are." And I'm like, "Just rip the Band-Aid off. Put it out there and own your truth. How much debt do you have? What are your minimum payments? And what is a realistic plan that you can stick to consistently?" So
Mm.
I would say that's the very first thing, awareness. Then step 2 is I would say look at your habits and really where are you spending your money? What do you value and what do you really want to spend money on? For instance, one of the things that I value is a clean home. I'm not the best person that cleans. I don't do a great job of cleaning, but I value it. And so in our budget, we pay for two amazing women to come every other week and clean our home. This is something that we started doing several years ago when we had this wiggle room. I swear to you, Deacon, I will continue to pay those women. I will let everything else go before, if something happens financially, they will be the last to go because I value so much them coming in and helping me with that process in my home. So when we can look at our spending and get really clear on our values, it's really easy to say no to all these other things that are pulling at our attention and our money so we can say yes to what we value most. So once you have your debt plan and your awareness, right? Look at your spending and make sure it's aligning with your values. And your values right now might be paying off debt. And so that's where that extra money goes.
Okay, so let's just say, because now you're past debt, and let's say we spoke to the audience, people in debt, they're looking to get out of it, but you're out of debt. What do you do now? What kind of steps should people be taking to get their finances in order?
Start investing ASAP, yesterday, if possible. I'm a believer in investing when you have debt, especially when it's low interest debt. I know that everyone needs to find what works for them. It's definitely something I regret. I would have rather stayed in debt 3 months longer, but still have been investing 100 or $200 a month for those years. But definitely start investing. Set some goals for yourself. Look at when you can retire, when you want to retire, that way you can really make a good judgment on how much money you need to invest to get there. Set it up on autopilot. Don't leave it up to yourself to make those investments every month because you're human and you're not perfect. And sometimes something else might look shiny and you might spend the money on that as well. So the way I see it is I set it up almost like I pay my electricity bill every month. I pay my mortgage every month. I set up my investments so they are a non negotiable. And then start saving for things that you want to do, whether it's send your kids to college or take vacations, have fun with your money, give to organizations, charities, things that you believe in, and just always come back to your values, I would say. And what do you value? And make sure that you are funneling money into that, because that's, I think, truly how we can take our money. I don't think that money can buy happiness, but I think that money can buy peace of mind. I think money can buy experiences and it can provide us with things that can make us very happy. And so, what are those things for you?
Absolutely. Now, what's the latest thing that you're working on?
Oh my goodness. So I am actually revamping my membership. I have a membership. It's called the Inspire Budget Inner Circle. And I have like this step by step plan that people follow. Well, I'm a teacher. I love teaching. It's definitely my strength. And so I'm actually going through and re recording the lessons. And it has been so much fun. I forgot how much I enjoy it. So I'm excited for in about the next, oh my gosh, 2 weeks for it to all be updated and have my current members see and experience those updates. Everything's a little bit shorter, it's a little bit quicker 'cause people will have better, faster wins, and then welcoming new people into the program. I'm really proud of it, so I'm excited about that.
That's awesome. Okay, that leads us to, if people want to know more about your inner circle and stay connected with you, where's the best place for them to go?
Well, you can go online to inspirebudget.com. You can also go to inspirebudget.com/class. And I have a free budgeting class there that really outlines the steps that I teach inside of the inner circle. So you can see those steps and see if you think that maybe it would be something you'd be interested in, but it's kind of just going over the entire process. And then, I have a podcast as well, Inspire Budget Podcast. Come check me out over there.
Awesome. Well, Allison, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me, Deacon.